Hello and welcome. This is Rasheem, your host of The Counter Narrative. Tonight's show is called Black LGBT, and we're going to be talking about race, gender, and sexual orientation and where those intersect. I have fantastic guests tonight that I'm really excited about having on: Dejanay, Brian, Jonathan. We're going to hear more from them as they come on. As they're coming in, let me just give you a little bit of a preface. I don't want to make any assumptions and think that everybody knows a lot about what these terms are, all right? So LGBT, that just stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. It's actually a much longer acronym that it's gotten to now: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, Q, queer, A, ally, and I think there's quite a few other ones. But tonight we're going to be using the term LGBT or LGBTQ, and that's what we're going to be talking about when we use those some of those terms. Now, I mentioned race, gender, and sexual orientation. When I mention race, I'm talking about the social construct of race, not necessarily the culture of race, but the social construct that isn't necessarily based in biology. And also, when I talk about gender, I'm going to be talking about that in terms of how it's a social construct as well. And when we talk about sexual orientation, I'm referring to a person's physical or romantic and or emotional attraction towards another person. Everyone has a sexual orientation, and people's sexual orientations are something that is very integral to their actual identity. Another thing that I'm going to be talking about, or we're going to be using terms around, is gender identity. And what it does is that reflects a deeply held, felt experience and sense of one's own gender. Gender is how we outwardly express, right? So I am a cisgendered woman, which means I was biologically born as a woman, and I outwardly express the way that I outwardly express, as well as the way that I biologically identify, are congruent. So I'm cis gender. Transgender is also sometimes referred to as trans. It's an umbrella term, trans is, and it's used to describe a wide range of identities, including transsexual. Sometimes cross-dress is referred to as that, or people who identify as a third gender. Some people feel like they are non-binary, so they don't necessarily subscribe to any particular gender, so they may say non-binary. So as we have this conversation tonight, I just want to give you that as a little bit of backdrop for people, and not assume that everybody's going to know exactly what we're talking about, and just set the tone. Oh, your name appeared this time. So the first person to join us here is Dejanay Chester.
Hey. Hi, you guys.
Yo, I got to get some sound effects so I can be like, when people come on or something like that, right?
Make some noise.
Make some noise. Come to the stage. If I could get some sound effects for stuff like that, I actually would.
That'd be dope.
I all the way would. Like, really,
super dope.
Would. Yo. So we are waiting for another guest. Before I have you go into full identify yourself, I'm going to read something that I found from the United Nations Human Rights Office of the Commissioner. And this says LGBT people of all ages and in all regions of the world suffer from violations of their human rights. They are physically attacked, kidnapped, raped, and murdered. In more than a third of the world's countries, people may be arrested, jailed, and in the last 5 countries, executed. Like people actually losing their lives for engaging in private, consensual same-sex relationships. States often fail to adequately protect LGBT people from discrimination treatment in the private sphere, including the workplace, housing, and healthcare. LGBT children and adolescents face bullying in school and may be thrown out of their homes by their parents, forced into psychiatric institutions, or forced to marry someone that they're not actually sexually oriented toward. Transgender people are often denied identity papers that reflect their preferred gender, without which they cannot work, they can't travel, they can't open a bank account, they can't access other services. So it's something that is definitely a conversation that is absolutely worth having in terms of LGBT and some of the challenges that they have and some of the basic human rights, because well, of course, what is this show all about but the counter narrative? So while I am still, our other guests are going to join us later, and I was wanting to kind of introduce you all at the same time, but let's go ahead and let's start with my girl Dejanay Chester in the house. So Dejanay, start by telling us, what is your name, what is your passion, and how do you identify?
Well,
my name is Dejanay. I felt like
my name is what? My name is who? My name is now. Seriously. So my name is Dejanay Chester. I'm 24 years old. Recent grad at Coppin State University. Woo! CSU, HBCU life.
in the house.
So what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about social injustices, education. A lot of people in my family are involved in education and things like that. So I'm really just a person that loves helping people and that loves being immersed in people and different thoughts and different backgrounds. So that's one of the reasons why I want to become a lawyer. I want to affect education. I want to affect social policy, social laws and everything, especially geared towards the minorities, which are women and people of color, Black people, if you want to get real specific, in Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore. Love the city with all my heart. Issues, of course, that's any and every city, but I feel as though with everything going on in the country, we've really become one of the cities where people are starting to see, okay, there are so many injustices going on in Baltimore. For a long time, Baltimoreans used to say, well, this city is advertised and we go through the same thing. They're talking about cities in Georgia or Alabama or down south, and we go through this stuff every day. And it's sad to say, but the riots really helped put all that stuff out there. Like, it's deeper than just Black people being angry and wanting to mess stuff up. It's a lot of deep-rooted issues here with the people in the city, the way the city is managed as far as politicians, the way money and economy is handled. There's just a lot of deep-seated issues here, but I feel like the Baltimoreans, especially Black people here in Baltimore, who are really invested in these communities, have so many different solutions. Like we've come to the point where, me personally, I feel as though we talked about every single thing that's going on. We know what the injustices are. We know what the disparities are. We know what's wrong. We have so many people, so many young people especially, that have so many solutions. And I'm just so ready for us to start implementing the solutions. Like trial and error. Even if it fails, we try. Instead of going about things as usual, we try different methods. So that's what I'm really passionate about. I identify as a cisgendered woman. I am bisexual. My pronouns are she, her. So yeah.
Hey everyone.
Hey
I'm so happy
Brian.
to get to join you all.
Everybody loves Brian.
Hey, when Brian smiles.
Brian come in with that beard on fleek. Look at that beard.
Yes.
Like it's the hair club for men beard. You see how it's all filled in?
You know, it's what's
Beard
in
on
right
fleek.
now.
Smile on fleek. Everything on fleek.
You know
Okay.
what I mean? So, Brian, we're starting off with, tell us what is your full name, what is your passion, and how do you identify?
Awesome, cool. My name is Brian Stewart. I am a Black cisgender gay male. My preferred gender pronouns are he, him, and his. I am completely passionate about equality, and that transcends across all levels of intersectionality, whether it's race, socioeconomic status, education, whatever have you. And so I'm so happy to be invited here on this show and to really, really just provide some context and some knowledge. I think we as a people and just as a human race benefit when we share the knowledge that we have. And so for everyone that's joining, that's viewing, I am really, really looking forward for you all to use this as an opportunity to engage us, to ask us questions, and to really just get some answers. And hopefully we'll provide you with some valuable information that you can then take back and then start to use as we move to just be a better people. So
Awesome sauce.
Awesome.
One of the things that Brian said that I really like, I'm getting a little bit of echo, is you talked about one of the reasons that made you want to do this. I want to hear from you, Dejanay. When I sent this out, when I asked you, when I was like, yo, I'm doing this show and here's the topic, and you were just kind of like, yeah, like, tell me a little bit about what made you say yes to having this conversation, to doing this show on this specific topic.
Because you're freaking Rasheem. Of course I want to do it.
I mean, of course, no. Maybe that plays a part, but
well, yeah, that was the part. And then I've seen a few of your other live feeds I've been watching. This topic specifically, again, I identify as I'm bisexual. I have a lot of different people have come at me a lot of different ways about that. People say, oh, well, it's not real unless you've been with a girl or unless you've, been in a relationship with a girl. People say you're confused. You don't know what you want. I went to an all-girls high school. Oh, it's because you went to an all-girls high school. I've heard people told me, well, you got it easy because, you can't really tell unless you tell somebody. You don't look it, you wouldn't know. Or I've heard, are you a girl? Or are you a boy? Are you confused? Like, it's so many different ways. And I feel like bisexuality for a long time has gotten such a bad rap. And I found myself, especially in high school and my freshman, sophomore year of college, having to to defend my bisexuality. I have to always say, okay, yeah, I'm bisexual, but I'm not that bisexual person. Like, I'm not, it's
you don't represent them all.
Morals. Yeah, like I don't represent everyone, and then people try to treat you as if you lack some sort of moral or standard by saying you're bisexual. So that's what. And plus, I part of the LGBTQ community. So many friends, so family members. Like, this is definitely a topic that needs to be talked about. It's been so much going on recently. This topic has been discussed recently. I personally don't feel as if it's so taboo anymore. So, yeah.
Okay. So I appreciate that. One of the things you talked about was the misconceptions, and you feeling like you have to constantly defend, represent, define, and those sort of things for yourself. Brian, I'd like to hear from you. What are some common misconceptions that you've heard? Uh-oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay, so common misconceptions regarding the community, Black gay men,
both,
Black,
all of it,
everything.
Well, I mean, I think so. I'm gonna hit on a very, and this just is cultural. That if you are gay, specifically if you're a Black man, that you are trying to be a woman. And that comes from, right, you see the hashtag, the things we talk about, masculinity is so fragile. And I think that's rooted from a historical context of just what the expectations of Black men have been over time. That and that just comes from our history as being slaves, I guess, if you will, that we are meant to be very brute. We are meant to be very aggressive. And so what happened is that we defined males off of their physical, emotional aggression, manhood, I guess, if you will. And so that can only be seen as one thing, is very, very macho. And so if you aren't that, that's where you hear the notion of you're gay or you're this or you're that. And so for people who are gay and they don't exude or exhibit those characteristics that are more so effeminate, and there's nothing wrong with my brothers and sisters who are effeminate. There's completely nothing wrong with that. But there's a stereotype that if you are more effeminate, you are worse off. You are just, I guess, if you will, even within the community, you're looked down upon, right? When we talk about just the oppression that we get from outside of the community, how we treat each other inside the community, because your gay is not my gay, your bisexuality is not my bisexuality. And so I think even in as we seek for equality and inclusion, we also try to develop a level of understanding even with one another of how we can be different. There are different shades of gay, as I like to say, or bisexuality.
I like that.
And so I think that's important because there's this overarching conception, particularly with Black men. You know, there's this notion that one of the worst things you can say to a Black man is call him gay, call him a faggot, right?
Mm.
You know, in the Black church, you can be anything in the Black church. You can be a homemonger, a rapist, or whatever, but you can't be gay as a Black man, you know? And so I think we have to do away with that stereotype that to be Black and gay, Black and bisexual, Black and anything is somewhat less than. Yeah.
I love it. And I especially love about what you said about the misconceptions around like how we define manhood, and especially with Black men, and how that connects with slavery in terms of Black men have to be brutes, they have to be aggressive. So we define what it means to be Black by being aggressive and being hard, and so when you're not that, you're not being a man. And I really appreciate what you brought up about if you're a gay male, it means that you're trying, like the misconception that like it's like you're trying to be a woman.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Dejanay, tell me about some of the misconceptions that you've heard, seen, or experienced. Some common misconceptions about
the community, period.
Whichever one you want to tell me about. Like, I want you to say what you need to be said.
Common misconceptions. So it's so many of them. So if you're a lesbian, it's because you know guys don't like you or guys aren't attracted to you. If you're gay, it's because girls aren't attracted to you, or something horrible in your childhood had to happen to you in order for you to be gay. It had to be from a traumatic experience, you know, where you raped, where you molested, did something like that happen to you. Being bisexual, oh, you're loose or you're fast, or you just want the best of both worlds. It's so many of them, but again, as far as misconceptions in the Black community, and I was just saying this with one of my good friends the other day, I think like Brian said, it's rooted in that Black masculinity. It's rooted in Black, what am I saying it right?
Patriarchy.
Patriarchy. Black patriarchy is just this hyper masculinity, and even with women in some ways have been, you know, made masculine. Oh, you always hear, oh, a Black woman is strong, she's the rock, she has to be hard, you know, you can't be vulnerable or emotional or weak. And then when you are these things, it's like, oh well, it's just like, oh well, you're not being what you're supposed to be. And I'm like, it's just so many different things. It's a lot.
Yeah, you know,
and yeah,
if I can join in, I think something important that we have to talk about here, especially when we talk about using this show to examine examine a society and culture through the intersectionality of gender, class, and race, is that you have to bring in the cultural aspect that Black identity is deeply rooted in religion. And so, you know, and I'm not going to speak on your bisexuality. You can really talk about that. But I remember coming through my process, and this was at a time where I was still dating women. What I got a lot of was more so from a religious standpoint in the Bible, you know, getting thrown at me that, you know, there's this one scripture about you need to either be hot or cold, but you can't be lukewarm. And a lot of people in the religious community, particularly in the Black community, associate bisexualism as being that lukewarm, as being worse than. And so I think bringing in the identity of where our Blackness comes from, which in large part has been shaped and has been formed by religion, which, as we know, is flawed in itself.
Thank you so much for bringing that. That is so good. It's so much like this just popping in my brain as both of you are talking. One of the things that Dejanay brought up that I really appreciate is this whole aspect or this whole idea that if you are gay, bisexual, or transgender, that some trauma must have happened. Mm-hmm. Or you're just unwanted by the opposite sex, so you must have went to this. Like, that's definitely one that I've heard, and I really appreciate when you Brian, what you're bringing to it in terms of looking at it from that intersectional context of, how does my race define what manhood is, right? Mm-hmm. How does what does my religion say about that? And how does my religion play into how I define and how I see myself? And I think a lot of times what we could find is if we buy into that this is the one way to be, we could find ourselves rejecting who we are, like rejecting who we naturally are. I'd like to know more about, can you think of a time or articulate a time for you personally, because this is definitely about narratives, that you've been discriminated against within a particular community that you belong to, that, I thought we was all I thought we was all part of the same community, and you were discriminated against within that community. I'll let you go, Brian, because your face just lit up.
Just lit up because, you asked the question of I think what has really put me on a path to do this work and to do some soul searching within myself and led me to where I am now. I don't think it's a secret for many people out there, the situation that happened with me at Morgan State University in 2013 with the Alpha Iota chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And that was a clear example. I was blatantly discriminated against because of my sexual orientation. And so that was hard for me for a number of reasons. We can talk about the personal aspect, and that's another thing. But in narrating the story, I want to get on it when you talk about a community. To be discriminated by a community, an organization, or an entity that was founded out of being discriminated against made me check not just my privilege, but the privilege of us as oppressed people, and how oftentimes, we see ourselves as oppressed people, but we also oppress other people. Absolutely. So then it made me look at not just the fraternity, but my culture, my race, in the sense of how do we, even as Black people, continue this cycle of oppression. And so when you talk about equality, equality has to mean equality for all, not just a few, not just some. And I understand, and there are different constraints and acceptability politics, I guess, if you will, of various organizations and things like that. But in the context, being discriminated against something that you considered family because it was so close to not just your culture, but your identity as a Black person is hard. And I think for most people, that happens in the church. Before it happened to me at Morgan with Kappa at Morgan, it happens at the church. You hear it preached over the pulpit. If you were to do a survey, a collective of the various types of sermons that particularly Black Christian preachers, whether it's Methodist, Baptist, Pentecostal, what have you, a lot of their messages when they are preaching in this, I guess, season of sin, they really emphasize homophobia and being gay, as if eating pork is not a sin that's deemed by the Bible, as wearing mixed linens. And so we do this cherry picking. And I think that's what we've done, even as a culture, when we talk about these entities, these communities. We cherry pick what we want to define as to advocate for, and
Right.
so it's tough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine, of course, that being especially tough when it's a community that you feel like you have a sense of belonging to,
Mm-hmm.
or that you would feel accepted from. Like, it's less of a shock probably from a community that, like, from the Klan. Like,
Yeah.
I ain't gonna be shocked, or the Tea Party. Like, I ain't gonna be mad at the Tea Party don't want me. You know what I mean? I get it.
Yeah.
Right.
But when it's like my mom and them, or my cousin them, or people that I grew up with, or people that whatever other ways that I make community, that's a whole different impact. Right before I get to you, Dejanay, and you let me know about a time where you've been discriminated against, I want to give a quick shout out to the viewers, to everybody who's in the chat right now. Eric N, thank you so much for being here. So Steph, Brian, of course, who's on camera, Dejanay. I appreciate you. Kira, thank you for being here. Tachi, thank you for being here. And Aaron, I appreciate you. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. If you're watching right now, please feel free to tweet it out, Facebook it out, let people know. Okay, Dejanay, you're up.
All right. Well, I've been fairly blessed in terms of discrimination. The only time I really, 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 truly felt outcasted was in high school. And again, I went to an all-girls high school, and they teach us sisterhood, and they teach us bonding and supporting each other as women. Like, the main thing that we're always taught at Western was we are women. We support each other no matter what. We help build upon each other. So everybody has different beliefs at the end of the day, of course, but when certain people find out certain things about you or who you hang around, it is a certain, you get told, oh, well, I don't want to hang around that person. I got called weird and different and funny. And I've been told by administrators that, I need to talk to a counselor. Something's wrong with me because of my sexuality and because of who I hung out with and things like that. In college, I've been blessed. However, I will piggyback upon what Brian said. It took me having a really good friend who was a gay male who was our SGA president. Having one of my really good friends who was Mr. Coppin, and people had a certain assumption about his sexuality in terms of when he was trying to pursue a fraternity, to realize, okay, we're at a HBCU. We're at a historically Black college and university, which was founded upon the notion that Black people were already, we already couldn't get education at PWIs, so we need to come together to get education. Then you have an HBCU where my HBCU was in under a low socioeconomic border, pretty much impoverished community, which is North Avenue, Coppin Heights, Mondawmin area. So those are so many things that should bring us together as a campus. So many of us come from backgrounds of low socioeconomic status, of not being able to get into a PWI because of scholarship or money and things like that. We're at a campus where we all should be a community. We all should be together, but yet you're discriminating based upon sexuality. And unfortunately, and one of the things I hated at which I found on plenty of HBCU campuses, is that for whatever reason, women get a pass. Oh, you're a lesbian? That's fine. But as soon as you say, I'm a gay male, or I'm a bisexual male, or I'm in the process of discovering my sexuality, oh, we don't want to be around you, or won't want to talk about that, won't want you here. We don't want to have these discussions. So, yeah.
I appreciate you mentioning that, because I've been in situations where I've been in rooms. I remember being at a poetry night. Thank you, computer. I've been in situations where I've been at a poetry room. Don't be listen, computer's gonna take over and they're gonna remember that y'all wasn't appreciative. All right. So I remember being at this poetry event, and this woman who was bisexual was talking about her escapades with her lover. and with different lovers or what have you. And from the men, she seemed to get somewhat of a pass because it played into some fantasies that they had. But then there was this young man who came up he wasn't bisexual, he was gay. And he was talking about his relationship, not even in as vividly as she was, but he was just talking about his loving relationship with another man. And their response to that was totally different than it was to the woman's response. And I think largely because we're okay with women being, hypersexualized in any type of way. We, like that song say, my girl got a girlfriend. Go ahead, Brian.
And, I think the problem with that is because we see sexuality just as the behavior of what happens between two individuals intimately. And so I think that is what makes people uncomfortable. We have to get to this place when you really delve deep in learning and understanding sexuality. You understand that even sexual orientation and things like that, it's more than just the behavior of engaging in sex or intimacy with another person. And so I think particularly when you talk about that fantasy with women who identify as bisexual or lesbian, it does play into that fantasy because men see them only as sexual objects, and this has become now a benefit for the male. And I even had to recognize my privilege, even just as a male, period. Whether I'm a Black, gay male, there is a privilege that comes with just being a male. And so I completely agree and hope that we can, as we continue just the national conversation of educating people about LGBT issues, is to see it beyond just the sexual behavior.
So Steph says gay men are seen as predatory. That's one issue.
Oh, I hate that so much.
Yeah,
right.
I really do.
Can we ask Steph to derive a question out of that? What is he? Can he ask a question so that we can try to answer that?
Steph, do you have a question around that?
Sorry about that, Steph.
No problem. Brian hit it right on the money. I think Brian hit it right on the money too. Steph, if you have a question around that, then go ahead and ask that too. I'll tell you another thing. Oh my gosh, I was watching something on YouTube recently, and this sister handled herself well, because this dude was just. Sometimes I feel like people they just don't know, and they really are curious when they ask questions. But sometimes people ask ignorant questions. It's like, I don't even want to answer that because you don't. This is just ridiculous. You just like, are you serious? And one of the things that he was saying about transgender women going into the bathroom with his daughter. What if, like, he doesn't want that because they could attack or rape or do something to her daughter, right? Like, first of all, like, you being transgender or you being a gay male is like automatically going to make you go in and start attacking people. Like, her. I mean, and one of the comments that he said is, okay, so if I'm a man and I get drunk, I've had a few beers, and right now I'm feeling like a woman, you think it's okay that I should go into the bathroom because I'm feeling like a woman? And the woman, I mean, she handled it well. She was just like, first of all, that definition that you're giving, like, a transgender woman isn't somebody who just all of a sudden feels like a woman because they've had a few beers, and, it like, I just wouldn't even be able to engage in some of those conversations. So one of the things I want to know from you two is about engaging in some of those conversations where you're educating but not representing an entire group, and you're also not exhausting yourself. And before you answer that, let me go ahead and get to the chat. Steph said, no, she's just giving in observation. Tashi said, what kind of stupidness? I guess that was in response to what I just said. And Kira said, because reality TV has been showing lesbian relationships as if it's only about the sexual part.
Yes.
And Brian responded to her, Steph, I think I get you. I'll talk to you on that in a second. So go ahead and talk to me.
Yes, I want to plug something because I think this is important, specifically since you brought up that scenario. And I hope that we follow up this series, and we can do more series where we can invite and have a transgender individual on the panel. I think having them included in the conversation is important. And, you know, so often within the LGBT community, we are privileged as, you know, lesbian, bisexual, and gay individuals. They are the most marginalized of our community. And so I think it's important that we include their voices here. And I hope that we can do a follow-up conversation where we can have their voice present. I can speak.
It's already scheduled. It's a whole
nothing like having, you know, their voices present.
Yeah.
To a little bit of what Steph was getting at, I think, you know, with the comment that gay men are seen as predatory, I think it comes from this insecurity of masculinity with men. Oftentimes you'll hear straight men say, oh, he gay, oh, and doesn't want to be around him because the assumption is a gay person is trying to hit on you or trying to talk to you. And I think what we forget is that gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender individuals are individuals just like anyone else. They have standards. They have preferences. And just because you may be uncomfortable, and I don't know where that comes from, but the notion that you identify or learn that I am gay automatically makes you think that I want you, right? And we talk about this predatory. There are enough of us that we're fine.
I don't need to convert you, boo.
We would really like to not be ostracized, to not be discriminated against, to not be beat up, to not be looked down upon, to not be treated like next to nothing. And so I'm reading Steph's comments. I think there's statistics that show that the majority of pedophilia is male, same-sex directed, which then convinces people on what being gay means. You know, I would have to accept where you're coming from with this, but I would also have to challenge and ask for the receipts, right? So the backing of those statistics, and let's actually identify it. Male pedophilia is not the same thing as being gay.
Right.
You can have the desires to want to have sexual relations or be sexually intimate with an individual, but not be gay. Again, this goes back to us just seeing it as sex or as the behavior. There's so much more to it. And so I think even in those studies, right, we have to look at not just what the data is saying, but the factors around it that people sometimes take to prove their theory or what they believe. And so I would agree. And I think if I really get to it, and this, you know, I usually, when I talk about LGBT issues, I really break it down like this. From the onset of our existence, we are conditioned to exist in society in a way that for some people, not until we get older and get into a space where we can rebel against our parents or whatever have you, decide for ourselves who we are, who we want to be. A lot of people don't have that luxury. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned. If it's a boy, it's blue. If it's a girl, it's pink. And everything from the onset of that child's development is nurtured around this identity of what we believe or what society believes, how a girl, a woman should act, how a boy, a guy should act. And so that's where that insecurity, I think, comes in, particularly with Black men who haven't yet become rooted in who they are themselves, aside from what society says that they should be. And not just society, but the Black people in their families and what they know expect of them to be. And when they operate outside of that, to be seeing someone that is outwardly and openly confident in who they are, I think it ruffles something that causes fear, misunderstanding, and that's what causes a lot of the problems.
Thank you. I want to bounce something to you, Dejanay. Did you want to say something before I have this question for you, Dejanay?
No. Well, no, I did. I wanted to I definitely agree with Brian when he says that it's definitely it's conditioned and it's rooted in what your expectations are, and not just societal, but your families as well. And we all know in Black families, you have certain expectations. If you're gay or you even show an indication of being gay, it's like, oh my God, where did I go wrong with you? boys are supposed to be super masculine, girls are supposed to be masculine but not really, you know, is a lot of that is rooted in just Black families. And I was talking to another one of my friends, we had a discussion the other day about this. I feel like if we change the narrative of Black families, which, you know, I kind of believe we're moving to now, but once we change the narrative of Black families and ditch this idea of, you know, you're supposed to be this way, this way, this way, this way. You're a boy, you're not supposed to cry. You're a girl, you're supposed to do this. You're a boy, you're not supposed to do that. Once we change that and just let our kids kind of be within reason, because of course, you know, you want to discipline and educate and all those things, but just let your kids be and grow within reason and find themselves in an earlier stage than just the rebellious stage, it might benefit the way we as a Black community and Black families think about things such as sexuality and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. Kira says, just to make a comment, I spent this past summer working with Baltimore City youth, 3rd through 8th grade in summer program. And during a rap session, the kids began speaking about LGBT and their questions were similar to what you were saying, Brian. Thank you for sharing that, Kira. I appreciate that.
You know,
That's dope.
yeah, I want to speak to Kyra. You know, I think what we need now, and this is what I'm advocating for, particularly across colleges and universities, but we have to start it now, younger, is we need people who are educated on these issues and who can create a space where students can ask these questions and get the answers that they need. It's sad that here still in America, you know, in sex education, where the notion of sexual orientation will probably only be brought up, is still being taught in a way where don't have sex with men. If you do have sex with men, that's bad. You're going to get HIV. Or the abstinence talk. We really have to do better with the educational component, because what I have found is even for people who engage in microaggressions and microassaults and are saying discriminatory things but don't mean to, it comes from a place of them just not being aware that what they've been conditioned and taught is discriminatory, abusive towards this community. Mm-hmm. And so we have to educate them on that so that now they are aware and they can do better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like we've accepted discrimination against some people. Like some people we've outlawed it for, and some people as a society, we said it's okay to discriminate against them if X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. Dejanay, the question that I wanted to ask you about is, can you remember a time when you ever felt that you had to kind of alter, you felt like you had to alter who you were in order to be accepted by a community that you belong to? And if not, then that's fine too.
When you say alter,
so I'll give you an example of me. There was a time where I went to I should say all white. I was at a school where I was like the only Black girl in class, and then I was in like AP classes, so I was definitely only Black girl in class a lot of times. And a part of what you were saying about, and I was tall, and my voice was I didn't feel like I had a deep. I don't know if I had a deep voice. I don't think I did, but it was deeper, had more bass to it than the other girls. But I felt like because I was so tall, I had to shrink a little bit. And I had to talk lighter and softer. And I had to be as non-threatening as possible. And some of that actually even carried on into some of my adult years, that I just felt like, because I didn't want to be perceived a particular way, I altered a little bit of who I was in order to be acceptable.
Got you. Okay. Well, I've started working. I've interned first, but now I've started working at different law firms. And unfortunately, I've yet to work at a law firm where there's a Black attorney or a Black female attorney or just a Black presence in the office. 9 times out of 10, when I work in these law firms, I'm the only Black person. I'm the youngest person. I'm the only Black person, and I'm a female. So I remember, I don't remember if I told you guys at Underground Rushing, but around that time I was working at a law firm downtown, and I was the youngest person in there, Black female, and I worked there for a year, and I remember feeling so stifled there. Like I I ended up telling my cousin sometime this summer it was horrible because while I'm getting knowledge and understanding of the law and different legal issues and things like that, you still feel like you have to shrink yourself. When every time I told someone I went to Coppin State, they said, "Oh, you go to Hopkins?" And I'm like, "No, I go to Coppin. I go to a historically Black college and university." Then they're like, when I told people where I lived, oh, they assumed I'm going through struggles and stuff, and I was. Let's be real, but it's nice to not have an assumption. My hair. I remember I started working at one law firm, and it was my first time ever having weed. They were like, I don't know if they were trying to, assuage me or not seem a certain type of way, but they kept telling me, "Oh, we liked you with your natural hair. Your natural hair is so gorgeous. It's so pretty." Da, 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 da. And I'm like, "Okay, thank you. I appreciate that." Um, I've definitely experienced, condescending tones and people being shocked that I actually worked in the building that I worked in. So yeah, for a whole year, I felt like I had to lessen myself. I felt like I had to conform. Um, Anybody that knows me knows I'm this all the way. I'm HBCU. I'm all for us. I'm all for my people in my community. But just working in that environment, I adopted that mentality of I have to shrink myself. I have to be smaller and lesser. I have to talk like this in order to in order to not be threatening. And then I definitely had moments where I would feel myself come out and be my natural self, and then I was perceived as being too aggressive, or people would say, "Oh, do you have an attitude? Are you having a bad day? Is something wrong?" And I'm like, "No, truthfully, this is me. I've just toned it back 20 dials because of the environment that I'm in." But thankfully, I've been around two of my cousins this summer, and they've been awesome. They both are teachers here in Baltimore City, and they've told me, they're like, you you don't have to really shrink yourself. You don't have to be less of who you are, less of a person in order to get ahead. Like, we understand that you need to have a certain decorum about yourself, but that you should never go into an environment changing who you are, because nine times out of 10, when you're really who you are, people will respect you a lot more, even if it is an environment where you're the only person of color. It, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Brian, you?
Yeah. I'm going to actually speak to this in short, but with depth. And it goes to my brand today, When Brian Smiles. I remember in high school, growing up very, very poor, I didn't want people to know that I was poor, or that my family had got food stamps or free and reduced lunch or benefits. And I remember going through phases of literally starving myself, not eating, because I just didn't want to punch in my number, because I didn't want people to know that that was the socioeconomic class that I was in, because of the connotations of what came with being poor, I guess, if you will. And that spiraled into more mental issues as far as depression and other things. And right when we talk about just putting on face or trying to show up, literally, I went through high school of trying to be this happy kid, and I was always smiling, and that's what I was known for. But my smile wasn't real, because I was back home going through hell, going through an identity crisis, going through figuring out where I was going to live the next day, or what was going on with my family, or just finding out who my dad was. And I remember having literally mental breakdowns where I had to start going to see a counselor, because I was living this triple life, and putting up this front of trying to be this person for these people, and trying to be this student for this person, and exist in a world as I could exist that would be acceptable. And I just got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. And I really took some time of deep self-reflection and healing spiritually and mentally to get me to a place. And that's where the birthing of, my social brand, if you follow me on all social media, it's all things positive, of When Brian Smiles, because now when I smile, my smile is real. It's something authentic. It's something that comes from a place of exactly who I am in the space that I'm in. And I don't smile all the time because life isn't all sunshine. And I don't feel the need anymore in my adult life. And I think it happens as you get older. I don't feel the need anymore to try to please people, because I'm at a place in my life where I'm secure in myself that I don't care what people think to a degree. So
Thank you for that. I'd like to hear more about, so we talked a little bit about like the religious community within, especially like the Black church, like the proverbial Black church, and some experiences in there. I want to know a little bit more about that in terms of like belonging. Like, have you ever felt like you belong, but you didn't belong? I recently saw this YouTube video that kind of went viral where this guy, he said, "I ain't gay no more. I like women." Saw that video. I like women. And
He cured.
he said, yeah. So I don't think that, you can
I am delivered.
That's what he said. How do you navigate that space? What is that like for you navigating that space? You want to go first, Brian? You look like you itching.
Yeah, I'll go first. That whole situation with Mr. Caldwell has sadly painted a particular image and stereotype over the community. And so while it is funny, and don't get me wrong, I have laughed, many have laughed. It's also sad because you can really see what the church has done to people. And when I talk about the church, I don't talk about God. I talk about people, humans, because we have issues with ourselves. We are not perfect. And the structure of this design of this entity that causes someone to deny themselves for who they are, who they believe themselves to be. I think that's a serious thing that you have to work with. I have not regularly attended a church since about 3 years when my Kappa situation happened at Morgan State University, because not only did I publicly come out, which was a revelation to myself, and there were ramifications at school, there were also ramifications in my hometown and personally within my family and then in my church that I had to deal with. And so a lot of people just knew about the school thing. And so keeping on the topic of the church, I remember going home and dealing with that issue at my church. And it literally changed how people saw me in my church, to the point that it made me leave my church, but not God. I've always maintained my relationship with God. I recently wrote a post about, uncalculated risk, and it talks about my faith in my relationship with God has grown over the years. But I've come to realize that it is not worth my mental health, my spiritual well-being, to be in a place that is not conducive. I'm not asking to be in a place that's going to cater and coddle me. But I'm not asking, or I will now never allow myself to be in a space that overtly, publicly, and intentionally denies my existence, denies my experience over others, and makes my lived experience and life and humanity a topic of judgment among people, in a place that should be meant to bring you closer to God, to encourage you, to inspire you, to lift you up. But for so many people, the church, particularly if you're Black, is the lead thing that tears and breaks you down emotionally. And so it's tough.
Mm. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Dejanay?
Okay, well, myself personally, um, I have quite a few religious people in my family. My mom, you know, I hate to say this, but my mom's on and off. My mom was one of those people where she would use it when it applied or as an excuse, but then other than that, it didn't really matter. Um, Myself personally, I'm a spiritual person. Like I said, I'm passionate about people. I believe you treat people the way you want to be treated. I believe that's one of the biggest things as far as religion. You're not here to judge people. You're not here to condemn. You're not here to push your how you feel or your opinion on them. You treat them the way you want to be treated. God said you treat all of his children with love, respect, kindness, and the way they want to be treated. So that's as a person, that's what you're supposed to do. Um, when I came out to my mom, of course, she was telling me, "Oh, we raised you this way. You grew up in the church." Okay. To me, that didn't really bother me. As far as churches, whenever I attend church and I encounter those people that are like, well, this person's gay, or we think he's this, or you get the sermons regarding homosexuality. To me, that's when I'm like, this is not the environment that it's supposed to be. You're not here to tell someone what they can or cannot be. You're here to push people to love each other. You're here to push people to support each other. You're here to bring people closer to the higher power. And the higher power teaches love, forgiveness, lessons. It doesn't say, "Oh, well, you're this, so you're void of my love. I have no forgiveness or love for you." And quite frankly, um there people are in churches, it's the house of God, but you have people there.
Mm-hmm.
People are hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
People have done a lot worse than be gay. People have stolen from the house of God. People have used God's name to better themselves financially. You're not doing it out of the pureness and love of your heart for God or for his people. You're doing it to fatten your pockets and to live a better life. So that's my perspective. Like, I understand how some people are affected religiously, but me, myself, and I, like I said, I'm spiritual, I'm people based. If you have all that talk about, God wouldn't want you to this, miss me with it. Sorry, can't do it.
Going back to my opening statements on this with Mr. Kawa and I am delivered, and how I talk about the church convinces people, and I don't want to use the term loosely, convinces people as it's this manipulating thing, but just the whole culture of the church creates this. I want to give just my personal experience, as you were talking about, with how you came out when you came out to your mom. I was living with my aunt at the time, and I came out to my aunt, and I remember vividly crying. I was going to her, and she's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I told her, I said, "I am looking at guys in ways that I know I shouldn't be." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was telling her, I said, "I think I'm bisexual. I think I like guys." And that was one of the hardest and toughest periods of my life, because I was convinced, based off of what I believed at the time and what I had been introduced from the onset of my existence religiously, that something was wrong with me. And I went to my aunt asking her to pray and have me delivered from something, rather than just seeking counsel or support to explore, identify. I knew, based off of my religion, that something was wrong with me. And I think that damages so many young people who go through that stage at 15 years old, and they're brought into a church 3 times a week, or having hands laid on them and prayed for them as if someone's trying to pray a demon out of them. What that does to their identity is unthinkable, which is why, I'm so happy that we have a president now and many advocates who do not agree with and condemn religious conversion and conversion for people, particularly young people. I mean, 9, 10, 11 year olds, people who are just starting high school and have just come to the intersection of having these feelings, these thoughts, and identifying where they are along their spectrum of their process. And to have someone deny that existence is not right. And that mainly comes from the church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like they're gonna pray the gay away.
Pray the gay away.
So one of the things that I heard you speak on are about how hi Tia, how identity is impacted. You guys are on Facebook Live as well. So shout out to Facebook Live.
Shout out to Facebook Live, everybody on Facebook
First
Live.
time on live.
Please follow me and add me on all social media at When Brian Smiles. Thank you.
There you go. One of the things I want to ask you about are where are the spaces? I'll start with you, DJ. Where are the spaces wherein you feel your identity is most affirmed? Where do you feel safe? Where are you affirmed? Where are you all of you is accepted? Not just your blackness, not just your womanness, not just your LGBTness, but where is all of you affirmed?
I feel that my identity is affirmed with my group of friends, of course. I have a very small circle. I have 3 friends. 2 of them are my best friends. 1 is my boyfriend. So I feel very affirmed in my circle. And it's contradictory, I know, because I understand that my HBCU has issues regarding LGBT discussions and stuff, but I felt affirmed at my HBCU in my classes.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely College Town Leadership, Rasheem, where I met you. Leadership, Underground, I feel like everyone's been accepted there. I've never run into a situation where anybody in a leadership session or an Underground was discriminated against, or we were trying to reason or nitpick who they were. We just accepted who they were because we're all good people. We're all here for one purpose. We're trying to make the city greater. I feel affirmed within myself. I think that's one of the biggest things. I'm cool with who I am.
I love me.
I like me. I love me some me. So yeah, I think that's one thing that it takes a lot of work to get to there. And that's one of the things I love that Brian said, was that he's at a point now where he doesn't have to please people or anything. Me, I'm still learning. I have those moments where it's like, okay, you got to reel yourself back and say, wait, I don't got to please you. But I'm happy that I'm in a space now where I'm like, I like who I am. I'm not compromising who I am for anybody, not family, not my parents, not anybody. This is who DJ is, and I'm fine with that. I know I'm a good person. Sexuality, whatever, I'm a good person.
You got a few likes from that comment on Facebook.
Hey.
You got some parts from when you were talking earlier. So now the same with you, Brian, in terms of where do you feel most affirmed? Wow. I mean all of you, not just your blackness or your maleness.
What was important for me is my family, because that's my root. And I have a interesting relationship with my family as it relates to this topic. I was 14 years old when my grandfather, I just met him that year because I just met my father, and said to me around Christmas time, "You better not be gay. I'll take my shotgun and I'll shoot you dead if you're gay. We don't have that in this family." And,
okay.
And since then, I had never had any level of affection with my grandfather, just as a man, just as him being my grandfather. And it wasn't until, I started doing things like becoming a White House intern and traveling the world that I remember when I graduated from Morgan State University, and I was leaving Baltimore to come to where I am in school now. And that was the first time in my 22 years of existence, uh, 8 years of knowing my grandfather, that he hugged me.
Wow.
And I know that was because he was proud of me. And it was important that he hugged me because he didn't just hug me, he hugged all of me. Because in that time, it came out that I was gay and all of that. And so that spoke volumes to me. And what I've learned is to create that space within my family. And how I've done that is I've just continued to live my life as I know it, to the highest and truest expression of myself, one with a love of God. We are very religious, faith-based family. And so for them to see me as me, and that took some time. In the beginning, it was rough. As we went along, it was rough. But I now show up at a cookout or family reunion or whatever, and I'm Brian. I'm not going to change, and people know that about me. And my mom knows that I will not come into a space where I feel like I will have to change myself, especially if it's family. And my family is aware of that. And to have my dad, my brothers, and my sisters take up for me, and not just take up for me, but challenge other people, other family members, that has been the sanctity. I find myself in a lot of educational spaces where I try to create those spaces for myself and other people, because that I see as not just an act of rebellion, but as a mode of self-care. I attend what's widely known as a conservative Christian university. And you have here this Black gay male at this institution. How does that fare out? I surround myself around people that see me for me, and that understand that me being gay is not all of my identity. And they don't allow that to overshadow what they think of me, whether or not they can associate with me because of their level of uncomfortability, or what people would say about them because they are associating with me. I've lost friends because of that. And so when we talk about where do I feel like those spaces, mostly with my family now, and then I try to create those spaces wherever I go because it is directly tied to my self-care.
I love that, especially that aspect of self-care, and like you're deciding you're not going to go in spaces where they can't accept all of you. And I understand definitely how important family is. There's a few things from Facebook. Dr. Crystal Lee just gave you a thumbs up, gave you a like.
Thanks.
Crystal.
Someone last name Daniel says, I have friends who have lost their jobs due to being LGBT.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah.
It's job.
Definitely talk about that.
Lose their life, and not to mention the number of transgender women who names go unheard, stories go unheard, voices go unheard. We don't, they're not in the news. They don't have their own particular marches and protests and things like that. And as we talk about that, and Donna Van Hook says, yes, self-care. So as we talk about that movement and all of these things that come out in support of like LGBT in general, I want to talk about aspects of, what has happened with Black Lives Matter. And I know historically, Black LGBT have been at the forefront and continue to be at the forefront of Black liberations movement. Black Lives Matter was started by 3 queer women. And then when you look at Audre Lorde is an activist. James Baldwin is an activist. Rustin put together that whole March on Washington that MLK gets the credit for. When it comes to those social movements, where do you guys see yourselves represented? How do you get your voice heard? How do you participate, and kind of where you are with it? DJ, do you want to start that one?
So a lot of these social movements, again, like you just said, it's all rooted in, I feel like it's rooted in white supremacy. I hate to say that, but that's what I feel like. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, of course, it has to be all lives matter because white people are included. We talk about Black Lives Matter in terms of LGBTQ persons, and we were, like I said, we're at the forefront of these movements, but it's always focused on the broader patriarchal agenda. You know, Black, we've said it over and over. I know a lot of people have said it recently. When a Black man gets killed or when something happens with, you know, one of my brothers, everyone's up in arms. But if something happens to a Black woman or a Black queer woman or a Black trans man, trans woman, you don't really get too much of the same response. You get the response, but it's not on the same level as if something happened to a Black straight male.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as representation, speaking from a queer Black woman's perspective, I see myself represented, but only as so far as to the bigger agenda. You know, if we were to break Black Lives Matter down and say, you know, let's talk about trans lives, let's talk about, you know, Black women, and let's talk about queer folks, queer men, queer women, trans men. It's always, well, we don't want to, you know, that's not the bigger issue here. That's not the bigger picture here. The bigger picture is this. When in all actuality, it all ties in together. Like you can't, I feel like it's in the Black community, and again, rooted in white supremacy, we nitpick our issues. We rank our issues when everything is an issue. It's all an issue. You can't say Black Lives Matter, but say gay lives don't matter right now. You can't say Black Lives Matter, but Black men matter more than Black women. You can't do that. If you're going to say Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter. You can't nitpick. And I feel like that's what we do in our community a lot, is nitpick the issues. And I think it stems from, you know, think about feminism. Feminism was supposed to be all women, Black women, white women, Hispanic, Native American, Latino, whatever woman, you're a woman, and these are our issues. But again, when it pertains to the issues that white women faced, it was a lot to be said. But then when we started going in on some of the issues that Black women faced, they got swept to the side. You know, civil rights movement. You know how many Black women backed the civil rights movement and had something to do with that? You know how many Black queer people backed the civil rights movement and was a part of the, you know, a part of the civil rights movement, a part of the anti-war movement. But yet we focus mainly on the Black males heading that. So I feel like we nitpick a lot. I feel like I'm represented, but not really. You know, I have to talk about certain things in order for it to be okay. When I start diverting to the smaller topics that no one seems to want to address, it's an issue now.
Yeah. Brian, right before I get to you, I want to go ahead and shout out Facebook. Dante gave you a thumbs up. Donna Van Hook mentioned Bayard Rustin. She also mentioned sometimes there is no response for Black women. She says, tell it, Donna said. Aaron said he wish you could give you props on here. And I want to, Donna also said you're truth telling. And I want to thank the people who are currently in the room right now. Kira or Kyra, tell me how to say that, sister, and I promise I'll get it right.
Kyra.
Is it Kyra?
It's Kyra.
Kyra, thank you for that, Brian. Kyra, Brian, of course, Dejanay, Dante, thank you for being here. Tashi, thank you for being here. Kente, I appreciate you. Aaron, thank you for being here. Even in the pre-show, you was here, brother. So thank you. So now for you, that same question for you, Brian, in terms of Black liberation movement and all these different movements where queer people are doing work, protesting and marking. When Trayvon goes down, we all linked in arms, and then we still see issues that happening with Black LGBT. How are you navigating those spaces?
You know, I have to say this first and foremost, that as a queer person of color, I have been, and we have been, and will always be integral parts of the movement. We have been from the onset of our existence. Whether we have known it or not has been a different thing, but we have been. I'd like to draw a parallel to some recent events that happened on Twitter, with individuals finding out that one of the major leaders of Black Lives Matter, DeRay McKesson, as a gay male, Black men coming out in numbers saying that, man, I supported Black Lives Matter, but now finding out that DeRay is a gay man, I just can't follow him. And that was a big discussion that gained some traction of why is it that as a people, particularly as Black men, we can't, Black straight cisgender men, can't support Black gay men who are leading and at the forefront of these social movements. And that's just something that we have to tackle with homophobia and just culture and how we deal with that, because you can support a straight person or someone you perceive or believe to be straight, but the moment you find out that they are gay, you can't support them, you can't follow them, you can't give to them what you gave anyone else. And so I think that's just an issue. We just we have to deal with that from a cultural standpoint. I see myself showing up because just as being a member of the LGBT community is a part of my identity, being Black is a part of my identity. And so I think the other part is this notion with Black Lives Matter, and what I'm hoping will come together is I think there are two perceptions of the organization. One is largely rooted in the visual display of protesting and rioting that people see, and they associate that with the organization. That is all the organization does, when it does so much more. There are so many different avenues where we are tackling and fighting and working in the movement to advance our causes and issues. And so I think there needs to be more, I don't want to say press, but understanding and education of what the organization is doing. The other thing I'd like to point to is that there are differences from a organizational standpoint of what happens on a national level, I guess, if you will, and what happens locally. And similar to Dijonay, it's hard because up until that issue with DeRay McKesson, and primarily what was happening with Black trans women, where you saw the birthing of Black trans lives matter, that I didn't think of myself as not being represented in the organization. And then I had to go back and look at the organization. And I do believe truly that the organization intentions, its the things that it does represent all Black lives. But I think we have to do a better job, not just at the local level, but within people that we know that are leaders of the movements, are making sure that we are holding even our organization accountable to giving the same level of care and degree to the high profile cases to those of members of the LGBT community that we don't necessarily look at. And I think that's just movement strategy, right? We understand that Rosa Parks wasn't the first person that sat on the bus, but back then the leaders then knew that Rosa Parks would be the woman or represented the woman, whether it was her physical appearance or whatever she brought to the table, to be the one to go ahead and spark this movement. And so a part of what I think we do in Black Lives Matter is we pick up those stories that go viral, that go national. We really rally behind that. And yes, we have, things that happen on a local level with Black trans lives and other members of the community, the Black community, where there are deaths and police brutalities and other issues. And we may not necessarily pick that up on a national level, but yes, while there's people on the ground doing work, sometimes we associate that lack of national press and media as not caring. And I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I do know that we need to hold the organization accountable to do its due diligence and its work for all members of the community.
Thank you for I appreciate the level of engagement in terms of that there are people in the movement that are fighting for, that care about, that are moving towards those issues. Because one of the things that I saw after what happened in Orlando, what
Mhm.
people just say, like, why aren't people upset about where are my people who, Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, I'm right here. I'm with you, I'm right here. But I think sometimes because some things get more attention, and I agree with you in terms of holding people accountable. I'm just gonna go back to Facebook. Crystal Lee says, seriously, what does his sexual orientation have to do with anything? Does that take away from his message? The answer is no. Hella side eye. Donna Van Hook says, stigmatized and taboo subject in Black communities are regularly silent. We have to keep these conversations fresh. You all are doing great work. Xanadu says, why should Black Lives Matter in gay matters? I'm sorry if y'all already answered this. Do
Mhm.
y'all want to take that before I put up the next question? And let me also say that 9:30, 10:30. We have about 9 minutes. Let me get to this, and then if we have time for that, because it shuts off 90 minutes afterwards.
Okay.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, as we're talking about communities, movements, and social issues and things like that, where do you find allies? How can you recognize an ally when you see one?
I'll go ahead and answer that question. You can't. um, I think to do so would be to do exactly the opposite of what we are hoping people would do with the community, right? Which is not judge us. Uh, and so I think, when we talked about this early in the segment of just showing up as ourselves, I think you do that, and people who are fine with that will be there. But I also think when you create those spaces that are supposed to be safe spaces, of being mindful of who shows up. Some people have an obligation to. It's their profession. When we talk about academia, individuals that are in residence life, it's their job and their role to be for all students. And so some have to show up as allies despite what their personal feelings are. And oftentimes through those spaces, through that profession, those requirements of their job function, it helps to change, educate, and shape their personal outlook on the matter and issues. But I would say just, and it's not easy, and I can only talk about this from a place of privilege, right? There are spaces that I can still walk into and people not think that I'm gay and treat me a certain type of way because they don't know that I am gay. And I recognize I have that privilege, but not everyone has that privilege. People just look at some people and they can see or assume or pass judgment that they are gay and treat them a certain way. And so when finding allies, I think the first thing is just being yourself. Um, and it's hard because for some people being themselves does not allow them to benefit from allyship. Unless they are in truly safe spaces, which is why safe spaces are so important. So I guess to answer the question, it's hard to find allies, but knowing that you're in a safe space. When we say safe space, that can be a physical space, but for our viewers and people who are watching, it's a space that's created by members or individuals of a community. And this doesn't necessarily have to be a physical space. You could create a group me and that be a safe space where the exchange of ideas, culture, and issues among members in the group can happen. And so I think if you find people who are in that group who may not identify as members of the community, but are inserting themselves in that group to be supportive, I think that's where the first and foremost you find the allies.
Okay, what about you, Dejanay?
Well, I agree with everything Brian said. I've found that a lot of times, well, I've been blessed and privileged enough to find allies that are genuinely allies. They don't have any other, you know, any other. I'm sorry, y'all. Give me 1 second. My brain is trying to catch up. Any other, they don't have any other malicious intentions than to be an ally. Um, I know I bring up leadership a lot, Rasheem. Leadership. One thing we mentioned as far as being ally is you can be an ally by showing up, understanding that this is not for you. I want to say this is not about you. Check your privilege and be a support system. Christine said that to me. One of my really good friends, Christine, she said that the first time I've met her and been in a safe space with her, she was like, she said that one of her ideas of being an ally, one of the things she holds dear to her being an ally, is that she understands that certain issues she can't really understand because of her race, but she's there to listen, to learn, be a support, help any way she can, and to check her privilege. So I feel like that's one of the biggest things for people who are looking to be allies. Understand where you stand, understand that this is a safe space, or it should be a safe space, respect it, and move on from there. If that makes sense.
Right. And we have about 4 more minutes before this wraps up, and
this chat is really jumping right now.
It is. I'm reading them all.
But it's all good. We're gonna have an after show, but we're gonna tie this up in a nice little bow. What I want to ask you guys is, what is it? Is there something about LGBT communities that it seems that people seem not to get, that you would specifically, if you can, for Black LGBT communities, that they just seem not to get, that you really want to make sure that they walk away with, or that they understand?
Yeah. Your lack of understanding does not have to equate to discrimination, to your standoffishness, to abusiveness. Ask someone, hey, is it okay if we talk about this issue? There's something I'd really like to know. Don't pass judgment in the community. One of the things that I advocate for is not passing judgment on individuals in the community. We all have our prejudice as people. We have things that we like. Everyone likes pink Starburst over yellow Starburst. That doesn't mean you have to pass judgment on all Starbursts. But my hope is that you would walk away in a space of, hey, I haven't allowed myself to be completely in a space of being able to understand and learn about this issue, this community, whether it directly affects me or not. Maybe I should before I speak on it, before I call someone out on it, before I talk about someone in it, because those are acts of violence against the community, and they can have really, really serious ramifications. And so if you don't know, find a place to ask and have the conversation, and have it in a respectable way. I'm not asking you to believe what I believe, but I think we can have a respectable conversation where you can get your point across, and hopefully I can get my point across, and hopefully we can have a level of mutual understanding and learning.
I appreciate it.
So again, everything Brian said, Brian hit it absolutely on the nose. One of the other things I would add to that is don't, like he said, if you don't know, ask. Don't stereotype the community. Don't make assumptions. I know a lot of people, well, I know some people would say that a lot of LGBTQ things aren't mainstream now, but I feel as though they kind of are. I've met plenty of people who've seen RuPaul's Drag Race and just assume they know everything about the LGBTQ community.
Got it all figured out.
So they got it figured out. I know everything. So I would definitely say, don't stereotype. Check your ignorance, check your privilege, understand that the LGBT community, our issues are rooted in other issues as well. They're rooted in police brutality. They're rooted in social economic issues. They're rooted in educational issues. So I really would like if people don't shortchange the community and don't try to separate and ostracize it from everything else that's going on.
Fantastic. All right. So I would like you to tell everybody where you can get Swift, where they can get Swift with you. Snapchat, website, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. I'll let you go first, Brian. I was about to call you Smiles. Yeah, Swift, Snapchat, website.
You can all find me on all of my platforms. When Brian Smiles. That's WhenBriansmiles on every single platform: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Find me there.
All right.
If you want to email me, whenbriansmiles@gmail.com.
I'm not that cool. You can find me on Facebook at Dejanay Chester. Rasheem has me as a friend. Instagram is simply DGDEEJY_92. Tumblr, same thing. I don't have a YouTube channel because I'm not cool.
Me either.
I don't have a snap. I don't have Snapchat. Don't kill me. I don't have Snapchat. I'm sorry. Twitter is the same thing. Simply DG_92.
Oh, good.
So yeah.
So that concludes this episode of The Counter Narrative. Thank you everybody on Facebook who tuned in. We're about to go to the after show. I'm not going to post the after show on Facebook, but if you want to join, just go to firetalk.com/Rasheem. firetalk.com/RASHEEM. Good night, Facebook. All right. Here, thank you guys so much for being here. Everybody who is here live in the chat, you know I like to do roll call.
In the trap.
I gotta get my life. I gotta get my words.
In the trap.
Bees in the
trap.
Thank you, Brian, for showing up. Dejanay, being here. Tachi, I appreciate you. Steph, Xanadu, why is this thing not rolling for me? It's starting to break down.
You know.
Did I get everybody? Aaron. If I didn't, and Kira. Did I say it right? Kyra. Yeah.
Now I have to go, Rasheem. I'm so happy that you guys have me on, but I will stay. I'll stay if some people have some questions or they want to get anything, asked or answered.
Yes, Brian smiles everything.
If they have questions, a lot of my work is steeped in LGBT diversity and inclusion, and so if you have specific questions, I can answer those questions, issues, and I'll stay on for about 5 more minutes to see if people have questions, and then I gotta run.
If you guys have questions, you're probably gonna.
Thanks, Tachi.
You're probably gonna write. But check his beard though. Don't he got that hair club for men beard? Like beard all on fleek. You know what I mean? That's painted in. We know it's painted, y'all. We ain't gonna say that.
It's painted for the gods.
So thank you again, everybody who's in the chat. Anybody who is watching this on oh Lord, I didn't need it. So it was just sitting there and people on Facebook was hearing me talk to y'all. Whatever, it's life. What else I was about to say? You can find the replay if you're watching on YouTube. You can see this at ShavillaRasheem.com. You can also find me on Twitter at S.rasheem.com. Instagram is S.rasheem. All right, so I am going to go ahead and wrap up this show. Good night, and if you want to come to the after show, just click on that link.
What is the link?
It's in the chat.
You didn't put it in there yet. I didn't see it.
I did.
Yeah.
It's firetalk.com/Rasheem.
Okay.
I see Brian's. I don't see yours.
.com/Rasheem.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about. And I got my exit music.
Are you listening?
We got a dance out, so y'all ready?
Damn. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Got a million.